It's good to see you, and it's great to introduce several new members of the commission, and I'll start with introductions if you don't mind. From Franklin, we have Council Member Gregory McLemore. He's not able to be here, but we are excited to be working with him. And welcoming back my friend from James City County, Supervisor Michael Hipple. Yeah. And I just want to note, Michael and I decided in honor of my past chair to dress like him today. So at Newport News, we have Council Member Cleon Long. Oh, there you are, sorry. Welcome. Nice to have you here. From Portsmouth, we have Interim City Manager Mimi Terry. Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you, Mimi. Smithfield, Mayor Steve Bowman. Okay. And Virginia Beach is filling the house. We love it. And we expect this every time. So sorry, no pressure, Virginia Beach. Council Member Dr. Amelia Bross Hammond is here. Council Member Josh Schulman is here. And Council Member Chris Taylor. So please welcome all of our new members. We'll now move on to the approval of the agenda. So I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the agenda presented.
So move, Bobby Dar.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a voice vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. We're now going to move into the public comment section. We have first, we have 2 submitted public comments, and I'd like to invite Steve Hansen. Are we going to have them come up, or they're in their packets?
So the public comments that we received in writing since the last meeting were included in the agenda distribution. You have one submitted public comment by Mr. Steve Hansen, and then you have a second public comment submitted by Thomas Wren from Suffolk. Mr. Hansen's comments relate to public health, not behavioral health, key to violence prevention. Mr. Rain's comments relate to large warehouse developments. Madam Chair, we also have 4 people who have signed up to provide verbal comments today, and I would recommend we proceed with that part of the agenda.
Great, thank you. So we are going to start with Mr. Steve Hansen. And when I call your name, you can just come up to the podium and you'll have 3 minutes to address the commission. Thanks for being here, Steve.
Thank you. I'm going to give you. Okay, I think we're good. Yeah. Okay, good. Shortly after the Rich Neck Elementary School tragedy, I made a request to the HRPDC leadership for a comprehensive gun violence examination today, calling for the task force to address yours and the public's concerns. This request was denied. Instead, Mr. Crum, not the task force, will brief you on the lack of progress made to date. It seems this task force, created under the commission's direction, does not think can feel compelled to answer you to the commission at this important time. This calls into question the very authority of the commission. It's time for a course correction. What is needed now is not a rehash of fragmented task force ideas and a violence network diagram without inclusion of supporting data and analysis and without a holistic plan for community assessment and collaboration. As I stated earlier, it's time for a course correction. My detailed written public comments make it patently obvious a public health approach to our gun violence pandemic is desirable and practicable. I request a commission roll call vote, if you will, today to require the task force in consultation with public health department officials across Hampton Roads to expeditiously provide the commission with a response to the following items, with the understanding the responses to items 3 and 4 will require more time to provide than items 1 and 2. So the first item, determine the feasibility and benefits of a Hampton Roads gun violence prevention blueprint based on a public health approach. Number 2, if a public health approach is not immediately feasible, determine what is needed to achieve feasibility, what avenues are available to resource shortfalls, and how quickly feasibility can be achieved. Number 3, for a viable regional blueprint, estimate the best mix of centralized and decentralized community health assessments, community health improvement planning, and cross-sectional collaboration across localities, including an organizational chart reflecting roles and responsibilities. And fourth, provide a rough draft overview of a blueprint methodology following CDC guidelines and a timeline. Some may consider this request of a vote today as a deviation from protocol. Is it more of a deviation than the telephone vote to change the Commission's approved 2023 legislative priorities, or more of a deviation than the decision to send last year's comprehensive economic development strategy to the U.S. Economic Development Administration without Commission approving the final version? I don't believe it is, but even if it is, if you do think so, it is a necessary action to demonstrate to the public that the region's leadership is more concerned with maintaining safety and healthy communities than with protocol. I've left a copy of this with the chairperson to facilitate wording of a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Our next speaker is Melanie Cornelius.
Good morning. I'm Melanie Cornelius, and I'm with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense. We're the chapter in Chesapeake, Portsmouth, and Suffolk, but there are chapters all across Virginia and chapters all across Hampton Roads. Simply put, we work to end gun violence. We're a group of grassroots volunteers, over 6 million strong now in this country, and I for one can say that I'm very pleased to see that the HRPDC is approaching gun violence in our communities as the epidemic, which it truly is across our nation. When I began this work about 8 years ago, we used to say, because we thought it was a startling statistic, that we lose 96 Americans a day to gun violence. It's a pretty startling number. Well, I can tell you that today, as I stand here before you, we lose over 110 people a day to gun violence. And that 2/3 of that number, we are taken by gun suicide. In the US, gun violence is 26 times that of other high-income countries. And guns are now, they were not when I began, but they are now, our #1 killer of American kids and teens. I can tell you as a parent of 2 in the CPS system, that's unacceptable. It ought to be unacceptable to every American, because that is on our shoulders. It doesn't happen in any other high-income country in the world. Black Americans represent the majority of gun homicide victims by far. Black Americans are 10 times more likely than white Americans to die by gun homicide. And women in the US are 28 times more likely to be killed with a gun than women in other high-income countries. I'm very pleased to see that the HRPDC has begun to acknowledge our gun violence epidemic as a public health concern that must be addressed as such. But I think that our focus really needs to be on gun violence prevention, on responsibility, our own responsibility, and on our community, because there's no other way to approach it. If I am a gun owner and I do not properly secure and lock up my firearms, and they are stolen by my neighbor, who then goes on to take those guns and commit crimes, am I not responsible? In the same way, every one of our communities adjacent to another is responsible for where those guns come from and how they are used. Their children are our children, and those communities are us. It's not somebody else's problem. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Shanna. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your first name, Turner.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Hampton Roads PDC, for having me here today. So I am Shauna Turner, and my organization is Hampton Roads Mothers and Men and Movement Against Senseless Killings. I started my organization in honor of my late son, who was murdered on 12/12/2017 to gun violence. He was leaving work and he got killed by a coworker. So I can go deep into that, but I'm a grassroots organization. I have been boots on the grounds, and our areas of impact are the 7 cities and the Eastern Shore of Virginia. I have sat at many roundtable meetings. I have been to Richmond for advocacy days, speaking to many legislators, including sitting in front of my own city council about that this is a pandemic. We do have a public health crisis going on, and I feel like there's not enough being done. And ever since I've been sitting down at these roundtable meetings, it's a lot of talking, but not a lot being done. And our Black and Brown communities are being affected more by this horrific, senseless violence. We can talk about domestic violence where men are taking their families out. We can talk about how mental health plays a part, suicide. My son wasn't in the streets. It doesn't mean that you have to be in the streets. It can happen to you, or anyone at any moment. But when I tell you that I've been out here on these grounds, I have a center over here in Chesapeake. I have depleted myself of my personal funds because of my passion, my purpose, and my works for, gun violence. And we have to start paying them more attention, not just to say, hey, okay, well, what are we going to do now? I've seen it. I've been at the hospital meetings, and I could think back 5 years ago. This has been 5 years ago, and it has not decreased. It has not decreased. So what I'm asking you to do is, please do something about what's going on right now, because I deal with a lot of mothers and fathers that lose, sons and daughters all the time. So that's why I'm here today, to speak out against gun violence, because you're looking at a mother that cannot sleep at night still, and fathers that go through, and siblings that go through. So thank you for listening to me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turner, and I'm sorry for your loss. Sorry. As a mother of 3, and I know there are a lot of parents around, I think that hits really close to home. Our last speaker is Robin Lane Holton.
Good afternoon. I live in Suffolk, and pleased to see Mr. Moore here from Suffolk. And I want to join my colleagues in reminding us all that this public health epidemic has to stop. I'm a retired public health nurse administrator, and never did I ever imagine that this become top of the list of public health crises, following others that have gone the way. As Melanie said, gun violence is the #1 leading cause of death for children, from infants up to 17-year-olds. Most of us are parents. Did you ever imagine when your children were young that instead of seat belts, bike helmets, all the other safety measures that we talked about and worried about with our children, that these days it's gun violence for our children in school, children in church, children in every place that you can imagine children go? Be Smart is the program that I wanted to mention today. Be Smart was started by Moms Demand Action. It is simply an education program for gun owners, for parents, for all adults. We are not anti-gun. We are apolitical. We are nonpartisan. We just simply want to remind and educate everyone that if every gun tonight were locked up, securely stored separately from the ammunition, that would stop suicides, school shootings, and unintentional shootings among children next week. The Be Smart program can be simply disseminated to parents through school systems. We're looking at that in Suffolk right now, very seriously. And just to give you a little more information, Be Smart helps keep children safe by storing guns locked, unloaded, and separately from ammunition, and ensuring that kids never have access to unsecured guns. So teaching parents about simply locking guns. We need to model responsible behavior around guns with children, of course, reminding them if they ever see a gun to be responsible. To ask about the presence of unsecured guns in other homes. Most of us parents never, when we dropped our kids off at play dates or our teenagers off at parties, asked, are there guns unsecured in your home? That's what we must do now. We need to recognize the role of guns in suicide. Again, our young people are being lost to suicide along with unintentional and intentional shootings. So please reach out to Moms Demand Action, besmartforkids.org. Simple education program can be disseminated through the school system tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holton. We're going to talk a little bit more in the agenda. Mr. Crum is going to present an update and some feedback on our task force. So we are going to continue this conversation later on in the agenda. With that, I will, speaking of Mr. Crum, move it over to you for the Executive Director's report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. First, before we go forward, I would like to thank our guests today and your thoughtful comments and input to the commission. And as we look forward in the agenda, when we discuss the regional legislative agenda today and that update, we'll also be talking about our violence prevention roundtable update as well. And of course, several members of this commission are members of that roundtable. And we'll be having that conversation a little later in the agenda today. A couple of items I'd just like to mention. First off, my monthly report is included in your agenda for your review. If you have any questions, I'd be very happy to respond. There are a couple items, Madam Chair, I would like to make announcements on and then report on. The first is very, very pleased that we have made a selection for the HRPDC and HRTPO's next, or first, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Liaison, which will continue the work of our previous position around civil rights and Title VI compliance for our organization. The gentleman's name is Quan McLaurin. He's going to join our organization on February the 1st. Quan has several years of DEI experience, including time at Liberty University as their Director of Diversity Retention, where he was responsible for creating, planning, and implementing initiatives and policies for their Office of Equity and Inclusion. Quan, who's currently a resident of Hampton, currently works in the consulting as a consultant around equity and inclusion, and he has actually worked with some mental health organizations in the Spokane, Washington area to provide them assistance for their DEI efforts. So Quan will be starting with us February 1st, but I really look forward to introducing him to all of you in person at your next meeting in February. Secondly, a second announcement that I'm really excited to make. I know everybody has known Greg Grutendorf for quite some time here. Greg's been with the HRPDC for over 21 years, and I'm really excited to announce that I've made the decision to appoint Greg Grutendorf as our next Deputy Executive Director for the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. I feel a little, I feel like maybe no introduction is needed. I could go over Greg's great work that you're all aware of, his contacts and relationships in the community. But Greg, I thought I'd just give you just an opportunity to say a few words as we start this next chapter. So really, really looking forward to having Greg be part of our management team.
Well, thanks, Bob. I'm just really humbled and very excited for this opportunity to serve the PDC in this way. When I came here back in 2001, I thought I'd be here for 3 years and move on. And I fell in love with the region, and I fell in love with the work. And the team that we have here at the PDC is just really fantastic. Working with all the localities has just been, it's always something new and it's always something different, and it's exciting. So I really love the regional work, and I'm just super excited to try something a little bit different. I certainly will miss the economics component, and Chip can probably relate to that, but excited to start something new. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
And you'll be hearing from Greg a little later, possibly his last economic forecast presentation, but we'll be looking forward to that. Finally, I wanted to give you a quick report on an item we discussed at this morning's Personnel and Budget Committee. For some time now, we have been attempting to look at the most cost-effective ways to do a complete redo of our organization's website. The website at the HRPDC and HRTPO is, goes back to 2010. It's dated. It's doesn't have the modern tools that we need to really be able to engage our community. The public feedback opportunities are quite limited due to the technology. We're concerned about that it's just not a good front door for our organization. So we've been working with the Personnel and Budget Committee. Matt Klepp-Eyes has come on board, and he and his team have come up with, done a lot of research. And we presented today an exciting approach to our Personnel and Budget Committee, which they endorsed unanimously. And I reported this earlier to the HRTPO board. Our proposal is that we found through research that 12 of our 17 local governments utilize a web vendor called Civic Plus. And in fact, the city of Chesapeake, I believe this afternoon, will be launching your new website update using Civic Plus. So we were able to find that they have a cooperative rider procurement-wise with the city of Norfolk. And we have worked with Civic Plus, and we've come up with a really good price point to update a variety of websites collectively. So we are proposing to update the PDC website, the TPO website, the website for the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission, the website for our regional construction standards, and even our transportation improvement program, and be able to do that in year one for just under a $90,000 investment. Now, the good news is that we've been planning for this. We've been placing monies in reserves. We have available financial resources to get this work done. Personnel and Budget Committee feels that time is of the essence. So they asked me to report on this today. And if there are no negative reactions, our team's going to go ahead and move forward and begin this update process. So, Madam Chair, I'll turn that back over to you.
If anybody's been to the website recently, you know it needs an update. There's a lot of great information there. It's just really hard to find. So I really appreciate Matt had an extensive presentation for us at the Personnel and Budget Committee. And unanimously, we all said, yes, go forth and conquer. And so we actually have our current website, we would have to renew in July. So the time is of the essence. So we're really excited about that. So we have a very strong endorsement from Personnel and Budget, but we wanted to bring it to you all today. If you wanted a further presentation and bring it back for a vote, we could do that. Otherwise, the monies are in reserve and we could just direct Bob to go ahead. And that would be my recommendation, but I wanted to bring it to the commission to make sure that that was good with everybody here. Any discussion? Okay, Bob, I think you got the blessing.
Very good. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Okay, great. The next item is the Community Advisory Commission report from Mark Godoldig-Yatrovsky. Oh, sorry. Stop the presses. Sorry, Mark, hold on one second. we have to do something that's really important, and that is to recognize some of our employees here at the HRPDC who make everything run in the background. So Bob, could you?
Yes, I thank the commission for just this opportunity. You know, there's a lot of us that get to sit up here, but there's so many people that you perhaps don't get to see as much that really make things happen here at a regional level. So I'm going to try not to embarrass them too much, but I do want to recognize a couple of people. We try to recognize people that have significant 5-year milestones with the commission. So the first gentleman I'd like to ask to step out from behind the camera is Mr. Rob Cofield. Rob, if you wouldn't mind stepping up to the table there real quick. So Rob Cofield's been with us 5 years. He is our PDC and TPO graphic and web designer. Good move, Joe. Tagged off to Joe to cover the camera. So a couple of things I want to say about Rob. You know, I really appreciate Rob really brought a creative approach and perspective to our organization. Obviously, you see him. He does a videography for all of our meetings. These meetings he crunches and he gets them up on the websites. They're live streamed on our YouTube channel. Our public's able to engage with our work due to what Rob does. But what you may or may not know, he does also, working with his team, does a lot of graphic design work for us. So report documents, designs for graphics, maintaining our website, doing the updates on the website, posting the meetings. That's a lot of the work that Rob Cofield does. So Rob, just thank you for everything that you do. So let's jump then up to a 15-year anniversary, and we have two people. First, I'm going to ask John Sadler to please stand. So John is our HRPDC Emergency Management Administrator. As I mentioned, he's been here 15 years. John is the person that convenes your emergency managers. So your local emergency management professionals, John is convening on a regular basis. They're talking about preparing for incidents that we really don't want to, think about all the time, but they're doing that work in advance to understand how to make our community as safe as it can be, how to respond to those incidents that they can happen. This is where the work on how to prepare for storms and hurricanes happen. And one thing you may or may not know, this region through John's department, you all pool a lot of money here. And why you do that is we can buy equipment more cost effectively together than if you do it all separately. And John is really good at finding federal dollars like the UASI grants and the Homeland Security grants to leverage some of that money. And some of John's handiwork, we're going to get the consent agenda in a moment, but you're going to see as I go down through that, just some of the equipment we're purchasing this year under John's program. Right now, he's working with the CAOs and your emergency management professionals and how to best advance our regional communication system. So that's reflective of some of John Sadler work. So John, congrats and thank you. Chris Vinay. Chris, if you wouldn't mind stepping up. Come on up, Chris. So Chris is the guy behind the scenes. We do hundreds of meetings here a year. Chris is one of the guys that makes all that happen. Room setup, preparing the room, ordering lunches. I heard good things about Taste today. So, but Chris is coordinating all of that, making certain what we need in the room is here. He also does building services with Andrew Margison, who he works with to keep this building and the grounds in shape. And Chris also does all the photocopying. So even our regional legislative agendas, these are things that Chris does in-house. Chris, we couldn't do what we do without you. Thank you very much for everything you did. All right, Joe Turner, your turn in front of the camera. So Joe works with Rob Cofield and Matt in the communications department. Joe is really an exceptional writer. He does a lot of our work. I've worked with him now 5 or 6 years on our regional legislative brochure in terms of the writing, in terms of the graphic layout and design. But Joe really takes the lead on our newsletter. And just to give you an idea, our newsletter exceeds other, the click rate and open rate exceeds national industry standards. And, Joe does a lot of work in that regard. Graphic design, he's assisting Rob with that. And Joe also does an awful lot of work on our website, which, as you can imagine, is a lot to maintain, manage, and update that. And I think he had the biggest smile in the room when you said, let's go forward with the website update. So Joe, really appreciate you. 20 years of service. Congratulations, Joe. And last but not least, Kelly Arledge, you're not going to get out of this, right? 25 years here at the HRPDC and HRTPO. Reported last year, Kelly's promotion to the Deputy Executive Director. Kelly oversees the administration department here at the PDC and TPO. She oversees the building operations people, the IT. She works to oversee our legal contract, and in her spare time does our human resource management here for our organization. So Kelly, I was joking the other day, I was trying to figure out how old I was when Kelly started here. That was a little bit of a laugh. But 25 years, she's just had a great tenure here. So Kelly, thank you for everything that you do for our All right, Madam Chair, back over to you.
Thank you, Bob. I think it's a testament to your leadership and the organization to have folks who have been here for so long. And we appreciate the team and the family that is the HRPDC. So thank you to all who are recognized today and everybody else who's part of the team. We really do appreciate you. Okay, just because I like to say it so much, because I finally can pronounce Mr. Godoldig Gutrovsky, could you provide the CAC report?
Thank you, ma'am. Chair, board members, the CAC met last on December 8th, 2022. You have a synopsis in your packet today, so it's not that much that I need to say to embellish that.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So now we get to move on to the election of officers. And I'd like to present the nominating committee report to the commission. The nominating committee has nominated Williamsburg Mayor, Mr. Douglas Pons as chair. And as vice chair, Portsmouth Mayor Shannon Glover. From the Isle of Wight, Randy Keaton, who would be who's the county administrator in Isle of Wight, to continue as treasurer. And we would ask that Mr. Bob Crum, our executive director, to continue as secretary. Are there any other further nominations from the floor? Seeing none, we'll close the nominations, and I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the slate as presented.
Motion to approve, Bobby Dyer.
Second that motion, Ella Ward.
Thank you so much. Any discussion? I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, this is the time where I get to pass the gavel. I'm just going to take a quick point of personal privilege if I can. First of all, to thank Mayor Pons for stepping up. And I just want to say thank you. I've really enjoyed being in this role with the commission. And I think about what we've gone through. We were in the thick of things in the pandemic. And this organization came together when we were suffering and we were trying to all fight for vaccines and trying to figure out how we were going to protect people. We came together. We came together as it relates to supporting offshore wind, which is a huge opportunity for our region. We came together as it relates to broadband, as it relates to dealing with flooding, and so much more. And I can't think of a better regional organization that's getting things done, that is a hidden gem in our community. And with this new website and the work that we're going to be doing in our communications, I look forward to continuing to expand its reach. So thank you for your confidence in me and for allowing me to be the chair. And I gladly hand over the gavel to your new chair, Mayor Pons.
Thank you. Sure, I will do that. Okay. You're supposed to be running out the back door.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be here and to be able to serve the region. As Ms. McClellan said, we've come through some really extraordinary times over the last few years, and we were able to do that as a region and as a body here because of your leadership. So thank you for your steadfast dedication to your community, this board, but moreover the region. And your leadership has been exemplary and very much appreciated. Okay, so now what do I do, Bob? Okay, so that takes us to agenda item 8, which is a consent agenda.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we move forward, Ms. McClellan, thank you so much on behalf of our staff for your support, for your hard work, always being available to us and everything you've done. And sincerely, it's been an honor to work for you in your role. And Mayor, we so look forward to working with you.
Excited to be here.
And Mayor Glover as we move forward. So next for the commission's consideration is our consent agenda. For the newer members, you always have the minutes and the treasurer's reports. We do budget amendments mid-year to take care of any new grants we received. The item letter E are our Homeland Security Grant contracts. John Sadler, I mentioned, had quite a few items on this month's consent agenda, but this is just a great example of the things that happen through John's Emergency Management Department. So we're going to ask for your approval, and these all come from recommendations and have been worked through with your emergency management professionals. We would like to purchase 2 mass casualty vehicles using grant money for the use of our localities, the money for cybersecurity planning on behalf of our region, the completion of a threat and hazards identification and risk assessment, the ability to do a full-scale exercise of a regional mass casualty plan, preparation of a regional crisis communication plan and logistics plan, and even some monies to help with replenishing our pharmaceutical stockpile that we have and share as a region, as well as some equipment to help us if we would ever have to go to shelter during a storm or other event, to be able to purchase tablets and wristbands to help us track people in local shelters. So we're asking for your approval on those items. Just a few more items. Approval of our socioeconomic forecast that Greg prepared and to feed into our long-range transportation plan. We are looking to establish some policies to do virtual meetings as a commission if we ever run into a situation where that would be helpful. You have your calendar schedule for 2023. And last but certainly not least, we're looking for your approval to add 3 new members to our Community Advisory Committee. Our CAC chairman we're excited to have them join, but 2 residents from the city of Norfolk and 1 resident from the city of Pocosin. So, Mr. Chairman, I would request that the commission consider action to approve today's consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. You all have the consent agenda items in your packet and have had the opportunity to look at it. Is there a motion to approve?
So,
I move the consent calendar.
second.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposition? Okay, takes us to agenda item 9, the Hampton Roads 2023 economic forecast. And I guess we go to Mr. Grutendorf.
Yes, we're going to have to start changing this title there to Deputy Executive Director instead of Chief Economist. But Greg, this is a report that we do every year at the annual meeting, and look forward to Greg's presentation and your discussion of this information.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It feels weird. I hope this is not my last forecast presentation. I don't know why that's in my head, but Bob, you're messing with me. But, you know, in the past, I have not held my disdain for economic forecasts because, well, they're economic forecasts. But starting every Thanksgiving, I start looking at econ forecasts for the year ahead. And, you know, out of, you ask 5 economists what's going to happen, you'll get 10 different forecasts, 9 of which will be wrong and 1 which will be lucky. But that's the nature of economic forecasting, I think. But the reality is it does give a real good opportunity to just survey the current economic landscape and look to the year ahead and kind of gain an idea of where we're going. So there is value in it, but nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And we've just been wrong so many times that it almost gets silly. So that said, let's delve into this. Starting with the national economy, certainly this is relevant to our economy here, but one of the things we like to compare is potential GDP versus actual GDP. So potential is the blue line, red line there is actual GDP, and it shows how well we are performing economically at the national scale versus what we could perform. And you'll see that the red line, the actual GDP, actually does bump up above potential GDP. And well, how can you go faster than potential? Anybody ever ran downhill? Right? Sometimes you can run too fast and it hurts. But here we have, you can see the difference between the Great Recession and the COVID recession. And you can also see this, the beginning of this or last year, we had 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, which typically is a recession, and I'll get into why it wasn't a recession. But we've been bumbling around a little bit coming out of COVID. National level. If we look at how this recession, the COVID recession, the red dotted line there is compared to the Great Recession and other recessions, we can see it's been kind of a little bit of a strange recession. We had a quick bump back, and then from there we've had some pretty continuous growth, but certainly a very different shape. You might be looking at that blue recession there thinking, well, was that the same recession? That was actually following World War II, 1948 recession that came about for very different reasons. But if you look at the national payroll employment, these are the headline job numbers that come in. I've got that red line there. That shows like the long-term average in terms of the growth in jobs that we get, which is about 133,000 jobs a month. Since January of 2021, we have surpassed that long-term average every single month. Almost by a factor of over 4. So why didn't we have a recession at the beginning of 2021 when we had 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth? Because employment's been killing it. Employment has been really, really strong. And that's why we're kind of looking at 2 different things sometimes, GDP and employment. But one of the things that you can see here is for the past 5 months, the number has been decreasing and the growth has not been as strong 5 months in a row. So that is certainly a cause for concern. When we look at how employment has changed across industries, we're up 1% above where we were when COVID started. That's about 1.5 million jobs at the national level. But not every industry is equal. You can see here that professional and business services, transportation, and utilities are up top. Education and health services is really just health services. The education component is mostly under local government, but there are education services that are included in there. So think of that as health services. But if we compare that to where we were pre-COVID, those have seen strong growth. If you look at the bottom, especially the last one there, tourism, the leisure and hospitality industry has been hit significantly hard. Local government always struggles through these terms when you have when the economy is weak. But one of the things that's especially hurting local government right now is we can't compete for workers because the private sector can pay more quickly, and government is slow to respond there. But in the middle, you can see manufacturing is up a little bit, retail trade is up a little bit, and that's what's happening at the national level. So how does Hampton Roads look compared to that? Well, if we go back to 2005, I just wanted to bring us back that far so you can see again how we came out of the Great Recession. We lagged behind the state, we lagged behind the nation coming out of that. And then you see the big dip there in 2020, and you can see what happened with the Great Recession. And once again, we're lagging. We got this slow crawl coming out where we're lagging the state and we're lagging the nation. Since 2005, the U.S. employment has increased 15.6%. Virginia is just under 13%, and Hampton Roads is up 5%. Since COVID, the U.S. is up 1% there. Virginia is about at par, and Hampton Roads is down 1.1%. So if we look at that, what has employment done really in Hampton Roads? We have averaged, going back to the pre-Great Recession, we've averaged growth here in Hampton Roads of 69 jobs a month. That's just over 2 jobs a day. That's not incredibly strong growth. So every job counts when we're trying to attract jobs for sure. But we have really struggled to add employment. And since COVID, we're down roughly 9,000 jobs. But the second half, if you look at the very end, the chart there, that green, you can see that we jumped up. The second part of that, 2022, was a really strong year for the region. So that does bode well. If we compare Hampton Roads industry, where have we seen employment growth since pre-COVID and over the past year? So if you look at the chart on the left, you look at the bottom there, of course, local government, we've lost a lot of employment there. Manufacturing, we've lost quite a bit of employment. Administrative support, that's been tough. But we have seen some industries grow since pre-COVID, transportation and utilities. Leisure and hospitality has been especially strong for this region. We've outperformed the nation by far. We've outperformed most other areas. It's not uniform across the region, but it has been a really, really strong industry for us. And then construction, when you have $5.8 billion worth of construction projects going on in the region, construction will be strong. If you look over the last year, so what's happened in the last year? Well, we're still losing administrative and support positions. Companies are looking to do more with less, and that's relevant there. But again, looking on top, you can see how much leisure and hospitality and healthcare, construction, scientific technical services have contributed to growth. The labor market, as you're aware, the labor market is certainly tight. Unemployment rates, which, you know, I've said before, the unemployment rate is a pretty useless number. But the trends are good. The trends are interesting. And here you can see how Hampton Roads is compared with Virginia and the US. And the trends are the same. The trends are the same across educational attainment, across race and ethnicity, across gender, across socioeconomic groups. So the trends are pretty much the same, but you can see how much it spiked there with COVID and where we are now. But that's not an especially interesting number. If we look at the labor force for Hampton Roads, here we get a better, that black dotted line there is what the labor force was pre-COVID. And so you can see the blue line is essentially a summation of the 2 red lines. That's our total labor force and includes the employed and the unemployed. But we have not returned our labor force. So what's interesting is if you look at the previous slide, we have a lower unemployment rate than the US. So that should be good. But if you look at the numbers here, our labor force since January of 2020, our labor force is down almost 5%. Our labor force employment down 5%. The number of unemployed is up 17.1%. Compare that with Virginia. Virginia is struggling as well, just not as bad as Hampton Roads. And the US, where the labor force is on par with where it was before. So we have a lower unemployment rate, but the US is faring better in that regard. Looking at some of our major industries here, 2021 was the Port of Virginia's very best year until 2022. And almost every month except November, we've seen just really record highs at the Port of Virginia. November saw kind of a slowing at the international level. We've seen trade slow there. So the port is running strong and things have been going exceptionally well over there. If you look at hotel revenue, you know, I mentioned tourism before, but this is the leisure industry, hospitality industry in Hampton Roads has just been doing really well. Really, you know, pushing shoulder seasons has helped us. Being more innovative with how we bring people into the region has helped us, being a drive-to destination. So there has been some strong growth here. It's a mature industry, so we're not expecting huge jumps, but part of the jump here is also inflationary, and I don't want to miss that. If we look at defense contracts, over the past few years, these have jumped up significantly. Money is coming into the region. This is what's coming into Hampton Roads, but the Congressional Budget Office says that projected defense outlays are continue to increase. Of course, what's going on internationally in Russia and Ukraine, as well as preparation for China, increases the amount of spending that's done. So with that, I just said the ports are up, tourism up, defense contracts are up. Those are three pretty big industries in Hampton Roads that have shown that we should be doing well. Retail sales in Hampton Roads, just wanted to touch on a couple of budgetary issues. This is a little bit of a strange one. We saw this massive jump when COVID hit. Several things happened there at the same time, which was interesting. We had a Supreme Court decision, South Dakota versus Wayfair, that says we can tax all internet sales. So this captures that increased tax on sales. But we also saw people shift from, remember when you weren't allowed to go out and do anything and you couldn't get your hair cut, you couldn't go anywhere. People switched from purchasing services to purchasing things. So we saw a huge bump in retail there. And then there was the inflationary effect. But even with that, if we go back to where we were 2007, the annualized growth rate is 3.4%. If we look at that on an inflation adjusted basis, it's just under 1%. And over the past year and a half, we're actually seeing a decline, especially when we compare to when we adjust for inflation. So this is not going to be a strong growth area for revenues moving forward at all. In fact, I think we're tapped out on retail sales and we keep trying to squeeze it. But this is going to be an issue for localities that are using retail sales. As people move back to services again, there is a shift. And people at the lower income level get squeezed out with inflation as well. So this will be a tough spot. Home prices, we followed this. This brings us back to the beginning of 2010, and you can compare U.S., Virginia, and Hampton Roads. So we've all seen growth. We saw the rather unexpected COVID growth. But if you look at the very end of the chart, what's interesting right there is how you see the lines that were going up, all of a sudden they go sideways. Interest rates. When mortgage rates bumped up, they really impacted housing prices. In fact, housing prices right now are effectively down. We've transitioned out of what was a seller's market to a buyer's market. So before you could sell your house and they weren't even allowed to inspect it, and now you can demand all sorts of concessions. But housing prices are downward sticky. Once you find out your house is worth a certain amount, you don't want to hear that it's worth less. So people don't like to change housing prices. They don't let them drop quickly. So we'll see housing prices kind of level out here. Inflation, the ugly word. We look at all the different prices that we see. Eggs have been increasingly in the media lately. But really, prices are all over the place. Last year when I presented, car and truck rentals and used car and trucks were on the top of this list. And now they've dropped. And so things are sorting themselves out. Airfares last time was on the bottom. Now, so things are shifting continuously. And the reason I bring up eggs is there's lots going on. So product by product, you're recognizing that there's different things. When 58 million chickens are culled, there's fewer supply of eggs. And so there's a whole lot of funny memes out there. But inflation is certainly something that is tricky. We're seeing it come down, though. The Federal Reserve has certainly made some increases in the interest rate, which I'll get to just in a second. But inflation jumped up. It's baked in right now, but the inflation curve is starting to turn. This is a fun chart, interest rates. So on the left, you have long-term interest rates going all the way back to 1971. I picked that one just because that's what the Federal Reserve in St. Louis had data back to. Nothing special about 71, but the interesting thing there is the black line is 30-year mortgage. The orange one is short-term, and essentially that's federal funds. That's 3-month bills, and then the long term is 10-year. And you can see how, of course, the longer the duration, the higher the interest rate. And what gets scary is when you see this inverted yield curve, which is where the short-term rate bumps up and surpasses the higher rate. So if you look right there, over the past, going back to 2010, you can see, wait a second, right now short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. That's a cause for concern, and most every time that points to a recession. So that's giving people cause for concern right now. Looking to the future, I said that economists are notoriously bad at doing forecasts. They do it anyways. This is not my forecast. This is the best minds apparently in the business, blue chip. But this is their consensus forecast for what they think is going to happen with respect to gross product. And you can see that the orange bars are forecasted. So the latest number we have is the third quarter of 2022. Fourth quarter is supposed to be coming down, but the consensus forecast for the first 2 quarters of 2023 is actually recession territory, soft landing. I don't know that we'll see the recession. 60% of people say, the economists say that we'll see a recession, but when we see the slowing of payroll employment coupled with the softening of the global economy and what's happening in the US, it could be a soft landing or a mild recession that we're going to see in 2023. That is to say, it'll just essentially be a slow year. So here's the PDC forecast for 2023. If we look at the national numbers, the consensus forecast is for very low growth, 0.4% there. Consumer price index, inflation is supposed to come back half from what it was, 8% this year, 4% next year. Short-term government rates, I talked about the inverted yield curve. Short-term is going to be higher, expected to be higher than long-term government rates. Looking at Hampton Roads, the PDC forecast is, I believe, will outpace the nation this year at 1.3% versus 0.4%. We have more momentum going into this year than the US does. If we look at civilian employment, the forecast for this year is 1.9%. I'll say it just so happens that in 2021 or 2020, I forecasted 1.7%. In 2021, I forecasted 1.9%. So I guessed those right on in those years. So this year I'm probably off. I also happened to hit 4.6% and I got 3.4% on unemployment rate. So wow, great forecasting, right? For 2023, I think 3.4%. For retail sales, I had guessed 2%. So there goes all my credibility. That was 16.2%. So retail sales, though, I'm looking here at the forecast is for 3.6%. If you compare 3.6% with the consumer price index above, means we're losing. Forecasted to actually lose in real terms, inflation adjusted terms. But that is my PDC forecast for the region for 2023. And just looking ahead, one of the things that we want to do is improve our outlook moving forward. There's a lot of regional initiatives going on right now. I mentioned the $5.8 billion in transportation infrastructure projects, the gap funding for I-64. Under construction right now is the regional fiber network, birthplace of America Trails. There's a lot of exciting trails going on. Economic development, site readiness that we're really invested in and kind of changing the nature of how we do economic development here. Development of the offshore wind supply chain, that we're actually seeing real jobs coming into the area now. Revenue sharing model for our localities. There's a federal initiative, super excited about the opportunity for Jeff Labs. We have a restructured model for economic development. I think that was long overdue and pretty excited about how that can impact change in the area. And then, of course, for our workers trying to get to work in a way that makes sense, a 757 express transit backbone, which is exciting. That concludes my comments. I'll be happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Thank you. There was certainly a lot to digest in all of that. Are there any questions, feedback? It strikes me when we talk about high unemployment and job opportunities, what's the disconnect and what can this body do to help kind of bring those available workers to the jobs that are available. What role do we have in all of that? Maybe something we can talk about in the future.
So, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think that's a great topic. You know, one of our close colleagues, Sean Avery at the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, was one of the select regions, our region in the country, for the Good Job Challenge, the federal funding that came to really wrap around a comprehensive workforce development program. So maybe having Mr. Avery come in to address this commission might be something very timely in terms of how that program is going to play out and how we can be engaged in that process.
Okay, I think it'd be a good idea. Any questions for Greg while he's at the podium? But we'll see how your prediction works out.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, takes us to agenda item 10, regional legislative agenda and mayors and CEO violence prevention roundtable. Mr. Crum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, HRPDC. I'd like to do a few things today. First off, provide everyone an update on our regional legislative agenda. And I know it's early, but of course, bills are advancing, budget amendments are coming forward. So I'd like to give you sort of a high level update on how some things are advancing at the General Assembly related to our regional legislative priorities. And then also, and it's a core part of our regional legislative program this year, but the work of the mayor and CAO roundtable on violence and crime prevention, and an update on how that work is progressing and what some next steps look like in that regard. So very quickly, mainly for our new members, we start a process every year in July that typically concludes in October or November, where we go through a variety of committee meetings to identify, develop consensus on, and finally adopt a short set of regional legislative priorities. Again, as a reminder, our approach here is if all 17 can agree, we place it on our agenda, but we don't include any legislative position that all 17 local governments can agree on. So this represents a strong consensus, a unanimous consensus of the 17 local governments that represent the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. This year, our agenda is more lengthy than the past 6 years, but again, I think responds to some critical challenges that we're seeing in the community. At everybody's place is a copy of our regional legislative agenda. I know you have several copies of this. We sent it to you a couple of times electronically. We did a mailing to you, but I thought it'd be helpful for you to have this in front of you today. If you open that agenda up to page 5, you'll see a table of contents that shows the various topic areas included in our regional legislative statements. I won't touch on all of these today, but I will touch on some of them that we're seeing some movement on, and some things that I think warrant our attention as we proceed through the General Assembly. Of course, a new item for us this year in response to the terrible impact of violence and crime in our community. Again, very much appreciate the comments that we heard during the public comment session earlier today. But our mayors approached this last spring and asked if the PDC could play a role in convening our mayors and our chief administrative officers in roundtable conversations about how we might coordinate and work together to address the terrible impact that crime and violence is having on all of our communities and on our region overall. We have held a series of about 4 of those roundtable meetings. We've also had a number of work sessions led by our CAOs that we've met with our Commonwealth's attorneys and our police chiefs. We adopted the PDC regional legislative agenda at our October meeting, that as the mayors and the chief administrative officers, many of which that are members of this commission, learned from our Commonwealth's attorneys and police chiefs, it became quite obvious that there were some other items that were important to consider adding to our regional legislative agenda. The mayors heard those items on December 5 and asked me to add these items to our regional legislative agenda. But before doing so, to send out those items to this commission, which we did in December, just to make certain that there were no concerns on those legislative items related to public safety. So I want to thank everybody here for the feedback we got and the support that you provided for those legislative items. As you know, things are moving very fast. In December, as we gear up for the General Assembly, and your immediate response allowed us to get this legislative agenda in front of our Hampton Roads caucus so that we could get them working on our behalf at the General Assembly. As we think about General Assembly, before I get into some of our specific asks, and let's just take a pause here and look at the schedule. Of course, the Assembly convened on January 11th. This is a short session this year, which means it's a sprint. Your legislative liaisons are working around the clock. Crossover, which is the last day for the House and the Senate to act on their own pieces of legislation, happens on February 7th. So here we are. It feels like it just started. We're almost to crossover. February 23rd is their last day to act on remaining bills and appoint their budget conferees. The session is scheduled to adjourn on February 25, which would place the last day for the governor to take action on legislation at March the 27th. And of course, any legislation coming out of this session goes into effect on July 1. Now, if we look back just to last year, you're all aware we had extended sessions and it went on till June, right? So we'll need to see. Last count, there were over 2,000 bills introduced, which is a lot in a short session. So there's a lot of work yet to be done. Just real quick, in the coming weeks, I'll be going up to Richmond tomorrow. I serve on the board of the Virginia Association of Planning District Commissions. We're going to be meeting with some General Assembly members tomorrow. Next Thursday, I've been invited to go to the Hampton Roads Caucus. I'll be presenting our regional legislative priorities to them. They've heard already some of these priorities, but we're really able to zone in on some of these public safety items now. So I'll be doing that presentation next Thursday. And for many of the CAOs have been working with me and others on the Birthplace of America Trail, the Virginia Outdoors Caucus has asked me to come present to them on February the 12th and talk about our Birthplace of America Trail. And I'll have more news a little later about a budget amendment that is really exciting related to that trail. And not only the boat trail, but the Southside Hampton Roads Trail as well. So let's talk a little bit about public safety. You can see our regional legislative agenda items. We have been using a framework, and Ms. Bunning is chair of our CAO committee, and Chris Price is our vice chair, and others like Dr. Fowler have been engaged. But the CAOs came together and have been sharing with the mayors this regional violence prevention framework that you'll find at each of your seats today. What this is intended to articulate is much of what we heard during the public comments, that this is going to take a very comprehensive, holistic approach, that there's so many contributing factors to the things that we're seeing for crime and violence that we really have to understand what those root causes are. And I won't go over this in detail, but as you look at this chart, each of these green boxes are identified as topical areas that the CAOs and mayors are dedicating each of their meetings to. So the last meeting, we taught the police chiefs and we taught the Commonwealth's attorneys. Our next meeting will be in March. We're going to bring in mental health professionals through our community service boards, and we'll continue to address each of these issues. And I think a very important conversation for us to have is how you weave mental health into this as well, and whether or not that becomes another box and topical area, as we heard through our public comment sections today. So this is what we've been using as our guide, recognizing we're learning every day, we're learning every week on how we organize these conversations, how we holistically come at this, understanding it's going to be more than government, right? It's going to take us all. Everybody has a role, from trusted community partners to local government to everybody, all facets of our community that we're trying to engage in this process. The legislative items that are included in your regional legislative agenda, I've just listed the ones under public safety very quickly. But more detail is provided in your legislative agenda. But I've placed a double asterisk next to some where I can tell you there's a lot of bill movement happening in Richmond right now. A number of bills over how we address, fund, reorganize our mental health system. Witness protection program funding. And we've seen a lot of concerns in our community where witnesses not showing up for the trials. And you have some bills, and I'm hearing budget amendments related to witness protection program funding. Doesn't make all these other ones not important, but I'll jump down the flock cameras. If you saw the news just recently in Isle of Wight County, the terrible tragedy that occurred, but flock cameras were an important tool that were used there. What our committee is asking for is on some VDOT owned roads, you have to get VDOT permits to be able to install flock cameras. Our roundtable would really, with our police and Commonwealth attorneys, thinks that's a very, very important issue to get addressed. Bills are happening around temporary detention orders. TDOs are a situation that if you have someone that needs to be taken to a mental health facility, right now your local police officers have to escort them to that mental health facility. And what happens is, or some of our city managers have told us, is sometimes you lose 2 or 3 police officers for 5 to 7 days because they have to leave the community and they have to stay with the individual until a bed becomes available. And many times that's 4 hours from the Hampton Roads region where that facility is going to be located. So what we're asking for there is the ability for other trained professionals to be able to perform TDO duties. Amanda, if you don't mind me quoting you, but you've often said that over 10% of your police force sometimes is tied up in performing these TDO roles. Mary, you had brought up, and we've been articulating through your legislative liaisons, that just giving our local governments the ability to contract with qualified entities to perform these duties would also be a significant help. So we've seen some bills there in budget amendments. And then the other one that we're really following is right now you have a number of retired public safety professionals that include retired police officers that if they wouldn't be penalized by VRS, would be interested in coming back and helping you with your local public safety needs, because we all know that you're all struggling to stay up to staff. But right now, the current VRS system doesn't make that very attractive. So we're looking for some assistance in revisions to VRS to be able to provide that as a viable option. One of the things that we're very fortunate is that the Virginia Municipal League, Michelle Gowdy, is a regular attendee at our Chief Administrative Officer meetings. VML is helping with many of these items, which we're excited about. But there's work to be done. There's a number of bills. I hope that in our next meeting, I'll be able to give you an idea of which may cross over and which, and then what other ones are starting to see budget amendments come in to support. So more to come on those items. Related to our, before I get into other topics, related to our next Mayor CEO Roundtable, we're going to do our next one in March. We'll be setting up that discussion with mental health professionals. We'll be getting an update from our Violence and Crime Dashboard Work Group. Greg Grutendorf and Sarah Kidd have been working with the mayors ask us to go set up some good sound data, a dashboard that we can really use with good data to understand where crime's occurring, but try to draw some relationships into how we can get to the base issues to try to get on the preventive side of this issue. So really pleased that your localities have appointed your crime analysts and your experts. That's not our expertise, but you have some really good people. Want to thank the city of Portsmouth. It's really stepped up and leaned into this with their staff, police staff. We're really excited. This was a big undertaking, but we're starting to get excited about how that's starting to come together. So we'll be giving our mayor roundtable an update on that, and then of course we'll know what happens with the General Assembly session. Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, Bob, if I, just first of all, acknowledge you and the Planning Commission for organizing all the local leaders. And if I could just make a couple quick comments, if you don't mind, because I have to move on, if that would be okay with the chair.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I think one of the things that we all realize that crime knows no border, and that we are all involved, not only as a region, but as a nation. And we can't obviously fix what goes on as a nation, but we can fix what we can do locally. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is collaboratively, but not only, with elected leaders, but leveraging, the people that are within our communities. And we found that there are a number of faith-based communities, but they're operating in silos. And we got to try to organize and get together and really tackle the problem. And I want to thank the CAO task force for putting this together, because, when it comes to crime, and I was deeply moved by the three speakers that were here, but to be assured that, we are moving forward as a region to try to really address this problem in a very, very vigorous fashion that is going to be results oriented. And, but, one of the things that as a result of this coming out, the city of Virginia Beach is starting a Project Hope, which means helping our people excel. And one of the things we're going to be doing are leveraging all the people that are working in the communities that know their communities better than anybody, the faith-based community, the not-for-profits, and all the organizations that are out there. And we actually did a focus group, and we found out that in Virginia Beach, like everyone else, mental health is a problem. Family structures are a problem. If you look at it, gun violence actually starts, the root of it, back in young people in schools. And that's why we're talking about conflict resolution and de-escalation and things of that nature. So as part of our Hope Project, we're going to have a very big and ambitious mental health program that we're going to put forward. We're going to try to get mentors and role models into homes, to help with the family structures. But the other thing is, you acknowledged before in another statement, Bob, about workforce development and a cure of hopelessness that many of the young people have these days can be cured by getting a very high paid job through training programs and things of that nature. And, working with the workforce development, Sean Avery is going to be involved. We're leveraging university resources. We're making moves towards trade schools. And if you want to help solve a problem, give a kid $75,000 a year out of a trade school as a welder, as a pipe fitter, as working on offshore wind and things of that nature. And I think the hope of Virginia Beach is that this is not a we situation, it's a me situation, it's a we situation that would be a template for the other cities, to engage and endure, and we do it as a collective region, and just be show the Commonwealth and the rest of the country how we do it. But once again, Bob, it really started with the Planning Commission, helping take the reins and organizing and things of that nature, and this has to bear fruit. This is not a project that we could put on the side. This is something that has to be addressed right away. Failure is not an option, for the sake of our communities, but, let's pull together and, get it right. And for that, we really thank you all for your help and cooperation with what we're trying to do here. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer.
Thank you.
Bob, you want to continue?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'd like to do is, let's talk about a few other important regional priorities. I'm just going to select a few of them. Obviously, flooding resilience. One of the things we were looking for is a dedicated funding source for flood prevention projects. Our legislative agenda talks about an adequate, a reliable, and an ongoing source of funding to help us with the Commonwealth's flood prevention needs. The governor's proposed budget includes $200 million for the Virginia Revolving Loan Fund. While that's a very positive step, keep in mind that is a loan program. It is not a grant program. And Dr. Filer knows some of these projects, we're talking big numbers. So we continue to monitor how these discussions are going through the General Assembly. Obviously, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, we're going to monitor the Commonwealth's continued participation in that program. But we also feel that we really need a state structure for coordination. Right now, even though with transportation, you have a Commonwealth Transportation Board, you don't have a parallel board to help coordinate the issue of flooding and resilience among various state agencies.
I just wanted to report, I also serve on the Joint Subcommittee on Flooding. We met in Richmond a week and a half ago. There is an expectation for this year to have one application for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund along with the revolving fund at the same time. We're waiting for information on how that will work. I've asked the director of DCR about the revolving loan fund, and I think what's important for us as local government is their idea was they would grant the local government's dollars, and then we would then provide loans to our community members. And I don't know that they've actually figured that out, that might go against our general obligation debt. They hadn't thought through that yet. So there's a lot of work to be done on that revolving loan fund program. I think it's an interesting concept, but it's definitely not ready for prime time by any means. And also that Community Flood Preparedness Fund will only have one time to apply for the year. The last bullet, the good news is they started meeting in January. They have created a group, I believe Whitney is on it, that they are reviewing monthly all of the elements that are looking at flooding throughout all the secretariats, and then they're supposed to come back by November with a recommendation on how to coordinate. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I just thought I'd give you an update since we're talking about that now.
Very good, thank you. So we're going to continue to monitor this. Your legislative liaisons are incredibly helpful of keeping track of these details, and we'll have more to report on flooding and resilience in February. I did want to talk a little bit about the I-64 gap funding. Why I bring this to the commission is keeping in mind that from an advocacy perspective, we do that from the PDC perspective rather than the TPO, but there is some very, very positive news on this topic. So I think everybody's aware that we have a 29-mile gap between exit 234 near Williamsburg and exit 205 near Richmond, near the Bottoms Bridge interchange near 295 in Richmond. The cost to build that 29 miles is $750 million. Now, our region, through your Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission, through your, we have a regional gas tax and we have a regional sales and use tax, has already invested $311 million to do 3 phases of I-64 improvements. The gap used to start at Jefferson, but you've, as a region, taken that gap down by 21 miles. We built 21 miles of widening already. So what we have left is that 29-mile gap. So here is the here's the status of the real-time status of where we are on this particular project. So last year, the Virginia General Assembly, our Hampton Roads Caucus members did great work, but out of the general fund, our General Assembly brought home $470 million for the gap. Our friends up in Richmond, seeing that we've already spent $311 million, they have offered through their Regional Transportation Authority $100 million. And just before Christmas, we learned $25 million came from the federal rural program for the New Kent County section to get us to 595. As of last week, we were $155 million short, but I'm really excited to report that the Commonwealth Transportation Board has submitted and we've asked them to do this, but they submitted a smart scale application for $161 million. That we're going to find out if it's funded or not come May. But we believe that's going to be a very competitive application, and that would fully fund the 29-mile gap between Hampton Roads and Richmond. To give us a little bit of buffer, the HRTPO will be submitting by the end of February a $25 million federal funding request because we know costs are going up. So it looks like we are on the verge in the coming months of fully funding the gap, which would be a critical, has been a longstanding legislative priority for this region. So that is very good news. We just got to keep our eye on this and keep advocating. Birthplace of America Trail. This is a proposal that takes the 52-mile Capitol Trail, Virginia Capitol Trail, that runs from downtown Richmond to the doorstep of Williamsburg, and extend it from Williamsburg to Fort Monroe in the peninsula, and to go to the Jamestown Ferry to Virginia Beach on the south side. A couple things happening. First, the proposed budget includes over $95 million for trails. I will be talking to the caucus and our caucus and the outdoors caucus. We want to make our boat trail one of the big 4 trail opportunities in Virginia. The Eastern Shore, the Virginia Capitol Trail, the Fall Line Trail in Richmond. We want the boat trail to be considered in that vein. Excellent opportunity to do a presentation to the Outdoors Caucus on February 12th. That's going to be particularly important. We're really excited. Delegate Brewer has submitted a budget amendment for $20 million that would support both the South Hampton Roads Trail and the Birthplace of America Trail. Now, that doesn't get us the whole way there. To give you an idea, you're looking at about $150 million to build the trail fully on the peninsula, probably close to that amount on the south side. But obviously, $20 million would be a nice kickstart to some of those efforts. So we'll continue to advocate, and again, have a real opportunity on the 12th to talk about that with our key General Assembly members. I wanted everybody to be aware of a bill, House Bill 1531. HB 1531 has been introduced by Delegate Jenkins. It's entitled the Hampton Roads Interstate Highway Corridor Improvement Program and Fund. It should not include the word interstate, because what it would do is it's a program for infrastructure and safety improvements to highway corridors that aren't interstate highways, but those highways that surround and parallel interstate highways in HRPDC. Mr. Moore, I know we've talked about this, and I know Suffolk is still taking a look and determining where your perspective is going to be on this. But what this bill would propose to do, just very quickly, at HR TAC, you have a sales tax of 7/10 of a penny. So 7/10 of a penny in this region generates about $180 million a year of funds that we're using to finance, and in combination with our gas tax, over $5 billion of transportation improvements. Delegate Jenkins' bill would take that 7/10 of a penny and take it up to an even penny. And that additional 0.30 cents would generate, they're estimating $84 million per year. And that would be used and could be applied to non-interstate highways like the 460s, like the 58s, like the 17s, other non-interstate highways. Where this is at right now is I think everybody's still studying this to determine their position on it, but because this impacts taxing, I wanted to make you aware as a planning district commission so that you all can be working with your legislative liaisons to weigh in as you see fit. It's been referred to committee in the House, so it is in a subcommittee. Mr. Moore, I know you and I have had, and Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind, if I could ask, Mr. Moore and I from Suffolk have had some conversations about this. Al, did you want to add anything? Because I know that 460 and 58 are pointed out as specific corridors where this could be invested, but obviously it could be invested in other corridors within the region.
Yeah, as I've learned more about it, it's not just 58, 460.
That's right.
Which is a little bit more regional. We had some concerns initially of it looking like a total Suffolk bill, so.
Right. Yes, and the stress, even though the bill mentions 460 and 58, this could be used on any non-interstate roadway. Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman, I think we have a.
Chairman. Will that be for new roads, like HRTAC is all new, not repairs and maintenance and that sort of thing? Or will this bill include maintenance or repairs of existing roads as well as new?
As I read the legislation, it could be used to expand and improve existing roadways. Adding capacity that addresses safety, it's not limited to congestion relief.
Would
So
that fall into HRTAC since that's not our purview as far as maintenance? Ours is new.
that, I think that this would not include maintenance. It would include improvements to existing roadways, and I think it could potentially be under the HRTAC portfolio if the bill would go through, and that could be used for financing to stretch those dollars as much as possible. I've talked to a number of people. I don't know if this is going to proceed. I think everybody's still trying to wrap their minds around this, but I did want you all to be aware of this.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Jefferson Lab, and then Mr. Chairman, this will be my last one for today, but this commission has unanimously supported the location of a high performance data facility at Jefferson Lab. Ms. Rolfe and I serve on a working committee at Jefferson Lab, and working with our federal partners and others as we've really tried to best position our region and the city of Newport News to be competitive for this. Based on your action, our chair did submit a letter of support to the governor's office, and we were really excited. The governor's proposed budget includes over $50 million of non-federal local match that could be used for us to be able to compete for that facility to be located at Newport News. And I think everybody's aware, great potential here for a number of jobs to be created and very well paying jobs. So that is good news. It's better to be in the governor's budget than have to get a budget amendment. So this is excellent news for Newport News and for our region. So Mr. Chairman, I'll pause there. I just want to give you a heads up as we're getting started with session on how things are tracking and what we'll be up to. And I always say this, but your legislative liaisons are outstanding. They keep us up to date. They let us know when they need us to weigh in, and they really work together incredibly well. So Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the update. As you all know, we did approve the legislative agenda last month, so there's no action required. But I think the update is important, particularly as you mentioned, we're in the midst of the General Assembly session, and a lot of bills out there that we need to be cognizant of, that we all should be paying attention to. So appreciate the update. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask very quickly, I got mesmerized by Greg's presentation, but we failed to take action to allow us to release his report on the forecast. My apologies, but could I ask the commission to take a quick action that we can go ahead and release Greg's report to?
It was me being a novice at this, and I missed that. So yes, so Greg did present us an economic forecast, and we do need to accept that. Is there a motion to approve that?
Motion for approval?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
All right, so no other questions regarding the legislative agenda?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know it goes back to the development of this, which is terrific. And I think lots of worthy goals. But I wonder if your group would also, because it is tracking through the legislature, take a look at some of the bills that would enhance the law enforcement ability to make traffic stops, and how many fewer guns have been confiscated since that legislation became effective and then previously? Because I've attended the meetings as an observer, and I've heard from most of the city CAOs that a high percentage of repeat crimes are committed by a small percentage of the same people. So, Mary, I think you were talking about that's what your research has shown. So the issue of the inability to confiscate guns during traffic stops, we are hearing is significant. And the number of guns that are confiscated along with illegal drugs and other things. So I hope that there'll be some tracking and inclusion of that. I think these are terrific goals. They all fall on local government for funding. And, you know, that's a difficult thing across the board. And I know most cities are committed to that. But, you know, if there are things we can do without heavy financial investment that tend to take away that ability of criminals, particularly repeat criminals, I think we would be wise to do that. And I would also add how happy I am to see better support for the retired law enforcement being able to be utilized. That is at least the third or fourth year that bill has been going through. So as also a point of personal privilege, thank you all for the good behavior, including myself. I'd like to introduce one of our new council people, Mrs. Newens, who is considering filling our Chesapeake vacancy, which we vote on next week. So please give her a warm welcome. And I think today was most interesting. I don't want to put her on the spot. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
One other thing, just since we're talking about legislation and it's a local government issue, in case you weren't aware, there is a pair of bills related to short-term rental properties that would usurp local government authority if it were operated by realtors. So just FYI, HB 2271 and SB 1391. Sorry, it was, oh gosh.
HB 271.
Hold on, I had it up here. Anybody else has it at the tip of their, let me know. 2271. And the other is in the Senate. It's being carried by Senator Lewis. And that one is SB 1391. You're welcome. I think that's important for local government for us to be aware of.
Absolutely. Many of our municipalities around the table, we created ordinances that were in the best interest of our local jurisdictions, and this bill could potentially undermine all of that. Yeah, so we want to pay attention to that and probably many others. Okay. So we went back to 9. I think we finished 10 now. So it takes us to agenda item 11, which is just the 3-month tentative schedule. The next meeting is February 16th. There's no meeting in March. And then the following meeting will be April 20th of 2023. So, program that into your calendars. Agenda item 12, the advisory committee meeting minutes. Includes the meeting minutes from the chief administrative officers, the CAOs, and the committee, and the community advisory committees. Mr. Crum, is there something that needs to be done there?
No, just all the advisory committee minutes, the technical committee minutes, really just provided for your information.
Okay. So you have that. So that's also item 13. The technical advisory committee minutes, you'll see those as well. Let's see, then agenda item 14 for your information also includes correspondence of interest. Any questions or anything on that? Is there any old or new business? See, everybody's packing up for agenda item 16. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.